Hello. As you've been looking at for 15 minutes, I'm Dan Heberden. So enough about that. Let me get my slides up here. So this is Bower. At least the very basic beginnings of what you would start to use, where you just run bower install jQuery, and you see that it went and got jQuery, installed it for us in the current folder. What we didn't have to do was specify a version. We didn't have to find out what the latest version is or whatever one we wanted. And what does getting jQuery look like for you? Or I mean really any library, but jQuery is a good example. Oops, sorry about that. Does that mean going to jQuery.com and downloading that? Does that mean going to the GitHub repo and looking for maybe a built copy? Do you have to clone the repo and then build it with their build tools? Do you memorize URL and use wget or curl to pull it down? Bower helps because it makes installing tools much easier. And it uses a manifest file to declare what it is that you actually want to download or to use in your project. And all those downloads are centralized into a common place, which is very helpful. And it, by itself, resolves dependencies. So before I get into all the pieces of what Bower is, I'd like to show you what it looks like with a canon of other tools, a full suite. And so Yeoman and Grunt and Require.js are great tools. If you haven't gotten a chance to look at them or learn about them, I really recommend diving into them. But we're just going to run a quick example to just show off some stuff that Bower can do. So first we would do is get Yeoman. Yeoman's just a scaffolding tool that lets you define some, there's a couple generators out there, well, there's like 16 that it comes with and then a bunch more that help you scaffold typical applications. And the typical application we want to scaffold is a Require.js app. So we can just get generator-require.js. You can do this yourself, but it's kind of nice to get everything all ready to go without having to do a lot of work. I'll show you what that looks like. Just make a quick. So assuming that I've gotten those two things, I can just run Yeoman with Require.js, and it'll do a couple things. It'll ask me some questions, what I want the app to be called. We're just going to make a quick weather app, so we'll say my weather app and a default description. Now I'm not going to hit enter now just because that's going to go through and download like everything from NPM and everything from Bower and everything that we need, and I don't really trust the Wi-Fi. So I'm going to just change to the baked cake in the oven. And we can see, actually, I'll just do this, that it already gave us a lot of stuff just out the gate. It gave us an app directory with a Require.js config file that calls the main file here. And we can, it just has jQuery in there, but we can put anything in there. But it also did some other stuff. It set us up with Grunt. So we have concatenation and minification, JS hinting, that kind of stuff already set up. It made a package JSON, and it did put our name in there for us, which is really convenient. So just some nice convenience measures. So let's go ahead and actually write some stuff. Now, if we're making a weather app, probably someone has done the work of getting weather. I'm sure actually thousands of people have probably done that all by themselves without even looking to see if anyone has done that. So let's just use Bower, and we'll search for weather. Let me make that a little bit bigger. So it looks like Dan Heberden, I don't know who that guy is, but he made a weather thing, and I'm going to trust it for the sake of this presentation. So I can just install Bower, or use Bower to install weather, and I'll save that to my configuration file. If you've used NPM, that's the same kind of thing. We'll talk more about what these pieces mean. But you see here that it went and it got the weather component, But then it also got the stuff that that component needs, which is jQuery. And so now, if I go back to my application here, I not only have the things that were part of the original application, require.js and jQuery and QUnit, but I also have my weather module. So let's go ahead and use that. Since it's an AMD module, I'll just hop over into my main file here, and I can just reference it directly. Let me hop back to my slides. That is not the right slide. There we go. Okay. So in our app, we would put in some HTML for our actual weather information, just the temperature and status, that kind of stuff. And then inside of that, we can use that weather component that we installed. So we'll just use the required to get that, and typical AMD stuff here, so nothing too crazy. And make a function that actually uses the position object that the weather API returns with temperature and condition and that kind of stuff. And then actually get our current position. So we'll use geolocation, get our current position, and pump that latitude and longitude into our weather module. I have the finished product here. And hopefully this will work with a connection. So I have a Connect server actually part of this whole suite here, which is nice via Grunt. So I can start a web server on localhost. You see here that worked pretty well out of the box, and was able to make a network connection, do all that stuff, but we didn't have to worry about finding this module and putting it in. We were just able to take advantage of it. So let's look at what actually happened here. This is the bower.json that was generated from what we did. And we have our required.js and jQuery dependencies that came out of the box. But when we installed weather, it also added that version here. The tilde means it's going to keep the minor version. So if that goes to 0.2.4, it'll go ahead and install that. So we looked at kind of a quick demo of what that could look like using that with other tools. I do want to show you one really neat thing, since I have this up. And that is using all of these tools together. And this is mostly just a plug for Grunt and how well it does all of this stuff. I just ran every task that's set up with this. So I'm hinting, I'm running my test suite, I'm getting all of the dependencies via required.js and putting them all together. And now I'm concatenating and minifying all of that together. So my original uncompressed file of 326K is now 23K. That's pretty cool. So if you aren't doing this or haven't looked in these kind of tools, I highly suggest doing that. One HTTP request just to get all of the site running. That's pretty neat. So why a client-side package manager? Well, using client-side tools should be easy. I mean, sure, going to hotscripts.com and finding some script was really fun 10 years ago. There's a problem with open and public code being committed into repositories. And I don't know about you, but I don't really like waiting for GitHub to download gargantuous repositories all the time. But what happens is older and buggy versions of libraries or frameworks or plugins get stuck in projects, and it's harder to work around getting a new one in there. And then there's a hesitancy to use an existing solution because it's kind of a pain to go out and find what's available. And when you do find out that there's a great plugin or piece, you have to go find out what it needs to run. And that can be a big hassle. But Bower, of course, makes it awesome, hence this talk. So let's look into Bower. Let's look at what pieces that it has that will help you. So we saw installation before. We could just install a component, and it'll go and grab all of that stuff. It'll grab all the pieces, put that into our folder. We can also do that via manifest file, so we can declare what we want, run Bower install, and it'll just go through that manifest file just like NPM and get the pieces that are required, along with anything that those pieces require and anything that those pieces require, until it has everything that you need. And of course, if you edit the manifest file, we want to change this. Say there was a bug and we want to force version 0.20, we can do that and run Bower install, and it'll go get the right files and make sure everything's okay as far as dependencies go. Now, if you want to do this from the command line, you can do that pretty easily just by putting in the module name that you want and then a hash mark and then the version. And that'll do the same thing if you need to do that from the command line. So in this case, we want jQuery 1.8.0, and so we can force that. And you can manually edit it, that's fine, but we have this same as npm --save and --save dev. And those let you just express what you want to install, but also put that into your manifest file, because chances are you not only want that now, you're going to want that anytime you recreate this project or someone else clones this project and gets that. But at this point, Bower is mostly just a glorified URL shortener. Like, this is nice, but this isn't what's really going to help you. And so upgrading is where Bower also shines in making your life a lot easier in dealing with client-side libraries and frameworks and plugins. Since required packages don't have to be committed into your repository, it makes discoverability and it makes working with these libraries much easier. Check out Bower LS. It gives you a quick look at what your current project looks like. And so in this case, we just installed jQuery 1.8.0. It's going to let us know that 2.00 is out and that we could look into upgrading to that. We don't have to go to the jQuery site or make sure that we follow the blog. And this is for any particular plugin or piece that you follow. But it also hunts down the dependencies just to make sure that everything's fine as far as what it requires as well. So we have a nice map of what our project looks like. Bower Update will take the current version, install it to the highest minor version possible. So in this case, it'll go to 1.8.3. And that's nice if you want to just make sure that while there shouldn't be any problems, run the test suite, give it a run through, and then make sure that you can deploy your site using these latest versions. Let's talk about the power of bower.json, having something that expresses your client-side needs in your application. And the easiest way to do that is this. Just obliterate the components directory. And of course, this would cripple your app altogether. And it's just as easy as running Bower install to get all of that stuff back. Now, Bower is just a package manager. Bower doesn't give you minified code. Bower doesn't concatenate things. It doesn't load modules for you, and it won't. You say what you want, and Bower gets it. Because there's plenty of great tools out there. There's tons of build tools. There's tons of things to help you do certain tasks. Bower doesn't need to do that for you. But what it does need to do is play well with others. And so since it's written in JavaScript, and since it's a node library, you can just require it and do the same things that you could do from the command line. Search, install, look at what packages are available, and control it from maybe a custom build tool that you have, or grunt. Another thing that is really nice and available for you is a plugin that Ben Schwartz made for Sublime Text. I'm not a Sublime Text user, so I might bumble around this a little bit, but I wanted to show you what this could look like. Actually, let me do that from here. And we'll go in here. All right, right, so here's a typical Sublime project. And the typical way that you run the built-in tools, Command-Shift-P, when you install this tool, it adds a bower. Oh, I can't really change the font, unfortunately, of that particular part of Sublime. I don't think so, nope. But what it lists there, if you can't see it, is bower install, bower configure project, and bower discover packages. And so from here, I can run bower install, and that gives me kind of an interactive search. So I could look for Angular and find that package and install it right from Sublime. So I don't even have to hop into the command line if I don't want to. Of course, if you have little snitch running, it'll ask you every time, if that's okay. So just from Sublime, I was able to add something into my bower.json file, and it downloaded it into my components directory where I have Angular now. So that's pretty nice, but there's another tool that this exposes, or links to rather, which is discover packages. And so Cinder made this, Cinder source on GitHub and Twitter. And this is a search website for Bower where you can take a look, and we can do the same thing, Angular, and get some available metrics about what matched that search, when it was last updated, how many forks and stars, a little bit more information to help you make a good decision about what piece you want to add in and discover things. Currently there's 2048, so exactly 2K components, which is fantastic. So let's look at the Angular stuff just really quick. I have a quick demo about what that could look like if you aren't a require.js fan, or if you just like Angular. Where did that go? There we go. So we're making a typical Angular app, have our namespace in the HTML, my app, and starting with the basic template of HTML. And we'll go and install that Angular component that's available. So add our Angular script into our project, and then add some basic module code. So we'll depend on my app and create a controller, and it's just going to make an itemized list. So we see the UL up at the top. It's going to make just a repeatable list item based off of this item list. But let's say that we want to make this actually work with Markdown instead. And I'm sure that there's some kind of Markdown Angular thing that's existing out there. So we could search for Angular and just parse out anything that mentions Markdown. And we could have also used this website here, or use Sublime Text. We could bower install Angular Markdown. Brings up the same thing. So whichever way you choose to get there, you can. And so at the end of the day, we install that Angular Markdown directive, and we see that it installed Showdown. That's what it requires for the Markdown parsing. And then we have Angular, of course, which is the directive piece, or what it depends on to actually run. We already installed that, so it doesn't matter. So now we have our three components that we need to add, which is Angular itself, the Markdown parser, and then the Angular Markdown directive. So we can add that module now as a dependency. It's already been included as a script tag, so it's now available. So we can include it just like we would in a regular app. Make sure that we specify that this item will be parsed using that with the BTF markdown here, the latter part of that LI. And then just add some markdown. So in this case, on the last item, we're just making that some pretty basic markdown. And what that looks like this is the full HTML. Whoa, that got really big. This is the full HTML that we have now that was generated. These are our components all installed: Angular, Angular Markdown Directive, and Showdown. Bower is updated with the 2 pieces that we need. And there it's running those 3 items through the generator, and it is parsing Markdown. So that didn't take a lot of work to go hunt down these pieces. And imagine that part where you find out, yes, there's an Angular directive for parsing Markdown. Oh, now I need to get Showdown. And now I need to find out where they put their built file. And you're well aware that that could be on their website, that could be in some dist folder in their GitHub repo, or maybe it's the source file, but you're not quite sure which one it is. And that gets really complicated, and that takes time, and that is a barrier of entry to use that particular plugin. But that also is just time that you don't need to spend. There's also a really nice component or ability of being able to work with a directory that's managed by a tool. And that is, if we go back to our step 3 here, so I have my bower.json file. If I want to see what my app looks like with a particular piece, I can just install any version I want. If I want to test, let's say require.js 3 comes out, and I want to test that with my application, I can just install that using Bower. And if my whole app just completely explodes, or I find a bug, and so I report it to require.js, or I install jQuery 2.01 and I find a bug, I can report that bug, I can help the community, I can help those projects that I depend on, but then I can just switch back to the version that I need, and it wasn't a big deal. I didn't have to rename to jQuery.old.js and put in the new one. And if you've ever done that, I know you have, you don't have to anymore. So we never had to hunt down Angular. You're able to find everything really easy. And most of all, the scripts are in a consistent place. So we looked at the require.js demo earlier. Now, I was using components as the full path. Components, a weather, and then weather.js. Now, you can actually there's a grunt contribution plugin for that actually adds those to your path automatically. So I could have just had jQuery and weather, and it would have just worked. So there's tools out there. Bower has a lot of pieces to integrate with Rails, with different node build tools. There's a lot of community around making it integrate with whatever work process that you have. So what's coming up? There's a lot of great stuff that we looked at, but obviously there's room for improvement. We're not perfect. This is still a new project. And so some of the things that we want to do are hosted packages. We want you to be able to authenticate with the registration server, and so we've started to work on this so that you could go in and rename a package if you added one or delete it. You'd be able to push a copy of a built file if you don't want that maybe in your repository. So you could push that up to us directly. And of course, we could give a cached copy. So if you don't have Git, or you want that even faster, we can just push the file that you want down, which is really helpful. Andre, who is the lead developer for Bower, Marco and him have been working on a rewrite of Bower to make it faster, to make it easier for us to work on, and to add better features. So this is the quick video he made. Let me go full screen here. I'll probably pause it. It's a really short video. So this is his dependencies list, and these are pretty big pieces, and these are a lot of pieces. So this is pretty indicative of a typical real-world app as far as how many components are there. So what he has here is, on the left is going to be with the rewrite, and then on the right is the current version. And so those run. Bower just goes to town getting everything. So you see on the left is already much faster. it was able to get all of that content in just 8.8 seconds, whereas the current one is 13. And then if you have cache, which Bower has, once you've actually done this once and you've gotten, most of these repos you're probably using across different projects, it's now down to 2.3 seconds versus 5.7 on the current version. And then, that time you're on a plane and you need to recreate the project and you have all that cached, 1 second. So this isn't a big commitment as far as having a process around getting these packages. Running, even on the current version, it's still pretty fast. And it's only going to get faster and it's only going to get better. And so working this tool into your workflow not only should make your life easier, but it should do a faster job of hunting down all these things for you than you possibly could. And as developers, that's the whole point. And of course, we're working on the regular stuff. So more docs, less bugs. Unless you want more bugs, I guess we could put them in. And more packages and more integration. And that's really the biggest piece of this, is we want to make Bower something that works with, that is extendable to work with any tools, and we can just write whatever middleware, whatever plugins to make it work so that you can take advantage of it in the way that you see fit. And we can focus on just getting packages, getting stuff for you in a sane way. But we need help with that. We need help on Bower. We need help with these pieces. And so github.com/Bower, all the pieces that we're working on are there. Bower IRC channel on Freenode, definitely come in and chat with us and let us know if you're running into any problems. We have a Bower Google group, and that's it. So I think the timer was going pretty crazy, so I'm not sure exactly what it all means for time, but I think I have time for questions. Anyway, thank you. I should note too that if you want to, we have a bunch of Bower stickers. And if you liked the logo, which is pretty new by Dave DeSandro, pretty neat logo. So if you want to sport that on your laptop or child's forehead, definitely come up and get a Bower sticker. Go ahead.
So this is awesome, really awesome. I'm looking forward. I haven't used it yet, but I definitely would love to start using this on my projects. So this kind of does all the client-side components and so on, and usually all our projects have server-side and client-side together. Is there, I don't wonder how is there any sort of an integration between like different kinds of server-side packaging systems as well, or packages that?
So the integration, that's where we want to make sure that as a developer, you're the one calling the shots. And so a good demo of this is actually this presentation. So I hooked up, which ended up not working that great because there's a lot of network connections in here. But I wanted to hook up my phone so that I could have the next slide show up on my phone. And so I wanted to use Socket.io. And so looking at that, I was like, well, I better use Bower because I'm writing a talk about Bower. And so if I have my node modules, I have Socket.io. So in this case, I know I need Socket.io on the server, so I just add that to my package.json. And then Bower search socket, give you a few different ones that are available, and you can see that there's a client available to get. So it's still going to be two separate pieces because they're going to be two different libs. But having the ability to hop between the two really easily and just have npm install and Bower install as part of your process. And when I showed Yeoman earlier, that actually runs both for you as well. So even if you're building something that scaffolds an app that you maybe build often, you can have that as part of your workflow of just, okay, here's my server-side components, here's all my client-side components, go.
Right, and I guess we can always script, like if you want just like a single install, get everything running from scratch or whatever, script that, and then you can script these components as well.
Yes, that's why I look at Yeoman generators to, or something similar to do that.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, I had a question. we use Bower at our company, and one thing I noticed is that when you Bower install something like Bootstrap, you get like 15 less files and 15 JS files, and it's not built. Is there any way to integrate with Bower to have it automatically build that as soon as I download it? Because I mean, some packages actually do have the built files in the source, but I'm just looking for a way to kind of improve that workflow, I guess.
Yeah, so Bower won't be the tool that builds that, because you can imagine that might be a make file. In the case of Bootstrap, it is a make file. That could be Node, whatever. So there needs to be a way to make that built version available. Now, the way that Bootstrap does it, they actually hide it in the docs folder. So if you go into docs, that's where the built JS and CSS files are. What we've been working on is there's a main property inside of Bower's manifest file. And so we're working on the spec to bring that to more light so that the actual file that you want is not only highlighted to you, here it is, but even possibly moved to root or something that makes that easier. And also the hosted part will mean that if you have a complicated build process, you can publish your built copy if you don't want that in your repo. I like it in the repo. I think that's a cool thing, but obviously not everyone agrees with me. So, so we're working on that for sure.
Great, thanks.
Hi, can I use my own modules that are not in a directory, for example, in the Bower file?
Yeah, if you want to, so if there's something that maybe in a corporate environment you don't want to publish certain things, or you have private code, you can reference any Git repository and just specify the Git URL and a tag. So actually when I was working on, on this, so CodeMirror I was like, man, I really don't want to have to commit this in the project. And then of course I clicked, I'm writing a talk about Bower, so I could use that. And I was just able to point it to the Git repo for CodeMirror, and it just pulled it for me. So even without someone going through the work of making their project Bower compatible, I was still able to just throw it in there and use that. So you could use that and specify a tag if you wanted to for a specific version of that.
Thank you.
On the server side, you have the luxury of if two modules require the same thing but have different version requirements, you can just load them as dependencies of the dependencies, and each one gets called in for the correct spot. On the client, you can't run jQuery 1.4.2 for one module and 2.0 for another module. So what's the solution on the client side for mismatched dependencies?
So that'll show up in the Bower LS, but it's going to ultimately be your decision to mitigate that, because like you said, there's no just easy way out. And so that's where you making the decision of what to do and which library is going to be the correct one or will work. We're working on finding out the best way to do that. Like, should our process stop altogether and say there's a conflict, you have to resolve this first? Or should we just carry on and hope that you can figure it out yourself? So we're working on some better feedback on that. But it's still, it'll still show you that we have two different versions, and you're going to have to figure out which one to put in. But that's where, again, the developer needs to be the decision maker, and Bower doesn't want to be or doesn't need to be a tool that forces you into a box in particular situations, because you might be very well aware, oh, this person just didn't update their dependency list. So well, I guess that's it for questions. So thank you very much for your attention, and come get a sticker if you want.